everyone. Okay, the purpose of this video is to run through some examples of scientific notation in your calculator. And the first type of calculator that we're going to look at is very similar to the types of calculators that I recommended purchasing for this course, because it includes what we call the double E key for scientific notation. So let's look at example A. Example A, we're going to multiply two numbers in scientific notation. And when I come over to the calculator, the first thing I'm going to do is type in the coefficient, 6.02, and then I'm going to stop and click on those capital E's. So it's the key that has two capital E's. Now when I click on this, it's only going to show a single E in the calculator, and that's okay. But what we do not want to do is we do not want to select the EX, which is the exponential key. Okay, so we're going to use this double E key. It appears as one E in the calculator. And then the only thing that we need to add is the power itself. So if it's 10 to the 23rd, we are only going to include the 23rd. So notice in the calculator you do not see times 10 anywhere. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply that by the second number, the coefficient, which is 6.42, and then click the double E key again and only include that power of -2. And notice how I'm using the negative sign, not the minus sign, because those are different as well. And when I click enter, I should get my answer. All right. For the second example, it becomes a little more complicated. So in the second example, as long as we are using that double E key, it should work out just fine. We'll include 1.67, double E, and then times 10 to the -24th, so we're only going to include the -24. Divided by 9.12, double E key, and -28. So as long as you use that double E key, it's simple. We get our answer, which is 1,831, and you can convert that into scientific notation. Now, if we were to not use the double E key, so let's try typing it in the way it looks on paper. If I did 1.67 times 10 and use the YX key, so times 10 raised to the -24th, divided by 9.12 times 10 raised to the power of -28, and hit enter. Now all of a sudden we get a very different answer. Notice that it's 1.83, and then you have the E, so times 10 to the -53rd, which means that is a very tiny number. Now let's try entering that same equation again, but let's put parentheses around it. So 1.67 times 10 raised to the power of the -24th. And then let's close the parentheses. So put parentheses around everything on top, divided by, open up a second set of parentheses, and 9 times 10 to the raised to the power of the -28th, and end those parentheses. Now all of a sudden we get the correct answer again. So if you do not use that double E key, you're going to have to include parentheses around everything. And if you use the Respondus, the calculator that Respondus offers on your tests, instead of using a purchase calculator, then you're going to have to include parentheses around everything every time that you use scientific notation. So that's a big reason why I recommend just going and spending the 10 or 20 bucks on one of those recommended calculators. And keep in mind that when you are in Respondus, that you will not be able to open up any other windows on your computer. So it's important that you either learn how to use scientific notation with parentheses every time, as you would need in the Respondus calculator, or that you learn to use that double E key on one of the recommended calculators that you purchased. Okay, so let's try this last example. And I'm going to do it two different ways. So the first way is going to be 6.63, and this time we'll use that double E key. To the negative 34th divided by 8.52 double E to the negative 12th times 6.04 double E to the 5th, and press enter. We get 4.7 roughly times 10 to the negative 17th. Make sure that you are always looking at the end of that number, and notice how there's an E with the negative 17. That's very important that you don't miss that, so that you recognize that number is not just 4.7, but it's 4.7 times 10 to the negative 17th. So if we look at the answers on the next slide for C, that is not the correct answer. So what do you think happened? I used the double E key, I used it appropriately, and the issue is order of operations. So if you remember, the order of operations is multiplication and division are both equivalent. So what this is going to do is it's going to take this top number, 6.63, divide by 8.52, and then take all of that and multiply it times 6.04 times 10 to the 5th. So the way that you just plug that into your calculator is going to look like this. .63 times 10 to the negative 34th divided by 8.52 times 10 to the negative 12th. And then you're going to multiply all of that times 6.04 times 10 to the 5th. So if you notice, it kicks that number to the top of the fraction, and now all of a sudden you're multiplying it on top and then dividing only by that 8.52. So that's a problem. And the way that we fix that is that anytime you have multiple numbers on the bottom of a division symbol, you're going to have to put parentheses around them, even if you use proper scientific notation in a calculator. Okay, so let's practice this again. We're going to clear this out. Type in the same thing that we did before, but this time include parentheses around everything on the bottom of the equation. Hit enter, and now we get the solution that we see on the slide, roughly 1.29 times 10 to the negative 28th. Okay. The last thing we're going to look at is how do you plug scientific notation into Blackboard. So when you are entering your answers into Blackboard exams, it's very important that you follow the notation that is specified in the problem. So if I say standard notation, then I mean a normal number. If I say scientific, then it must be scientific notation. And Blackboard would not recognize the way that you would enter it on a paper. So 2.61 times 10 to the 24th, Blackboard is not going to recognize that. So we have to convert it into the scientific notation that Blackboard is used to seeing. And it's very similar to that calculator that we just looked at. You want to include the coefficient and then a single lowercase e. You could capitalize it, it doesn't matter. But we're going to do the coefficient, the letter e, and then only the power. 24. Okay, and you're going to go through some practice in Blackboard to make sure that you do know how to enter scientific notation versus standard notation in Blackboard. But I hope this video helps.